90 days. Nice.
The Ray Hanania Show is brought to you by the U.S. Arab Radio Network and sponsored by Arab News Newspaper, the Middle East's leading English language publication, with print and online editions in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, France, Japan, Pakistan, England, and the United States. Listen to live radio every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern in Detroit, Washington, D.C., New York, and Ontario, Canada. Or watch the live broadcast on Facebook.com/Arab News. The Ray Hanania Show is rebroadcast in Chicago at 12 noon on Thursday. For more information on the radio stations, live Facebook broadcast, and podcasts, visit ArabNews.com. And now, here's your host, columnist and U.S. Special Correspondent for Arab News, Ray Hanania.
And welcome to the program, everybody. It is Wednesday, June 29th, 2022, and we're broadcasting live in Detroit on WNZK AM 690 and Washington, D.C. on WDMV AM 700. We will rebroadcast Thursday, 7 a.m. in Detroit, again on WNZK AM 690, and in Chicago at 12 noon on 1080 a.m. Today, we're going to focus on two issues. Later during the program, at the bottom of the hour, we're going to talk with Shadin Maali. She's the Chief District Affairs Director for Congresswoman Marie Newman, who was elected in 2020 to represent the 3rd Congressional District, which, by the way, was the one district that had the largest concentration of Palestinian American voters, according to the New York Times. Unfortunately, yesterday in the Illinois Democratic primary, the Democrats shoved her into a face-off with another Democrat, more centrist Democratic Congressman Sean Casten. And Casten did defeat Newman, who probably was one of the Midwest, in addition to several other congresswomen like Betty McCollum and Ilhan Omar, one of the biggest champions of Palestinian rights. So we'll talk to Shadin about that and also other races in the Illinois election at the bottom of the hour. Right now, though, I want to introduce our first guest, Samer Khalaf. He is the national president of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee. He's held that post since 2013. He served as the Interim ADC Legal Director in 1997. And he started out, I think, as an intern in 1996. I didn't realize how young you were, Samer. Yes. Welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me, Ray. Yes, It's my long history with ADC, but I'm happy to be with the organization.
Well, ADC is a great organization. I remember I was there when it was founded. I always like to say that because we're talking about back in 88 or something like that?
1980.
1980. Oh my gosh, time is flying fast.
You're dating yourself.
Oh my gosh, don't I? Well, then when they call me a veteran journalist and commentator, that means I'm just old now. That's all it means. Hey. So ADC deals with some of the biggest discrimination cases that challenge the Arab American and Arab Muslim community. And I wanted to bring Samer on. You just got through with a big convention in Washington that was very successful, by the way. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I know that one of the topics, of course, was the challenges that Arab Americans continue to face in terms of discrimination in this country. Give us kind of an overview of how serious those challenges are. And I know that you had mentioned something earlier that we could talk about too, about how COVID really impacted this in a really unusual way. So what's the status with discrimination?
Well, COVID sort of reoriented the nature of discrimination and of hate going around the country. We saw a lot of it specifically towards the Asian American community, with them being sort of labeled as the creators or the perpetuators of the virus itself. So we saw a lot of that happening, but we also and a lot of it had to do with the whole January 6th, the whole movement around Trump with the Proud Boys and whatnot, and the Oath Keepers, and the rise of the sort of the white supremacy movement or the white nationalist movement. So we're seeing a lot more, I think, of the more dangerous form of discrimination, and that's what those forms that are associated with violence and actual physical harm. So we saw a lot more of that, a lot less of the traditional sort of discrimination regarding, employment discrimination and whatnot, only because sort of COVID, because everybody was working from home, and the whole way America worked and got their work done changed during COVID. So we saw less of that, but more or less the more violent form and extremist form of discrimination occurring, unfortunately.
So those groups that we've seen, kind of, the country over the last several years has been polarized. There's like this big gap with only a few people in the middle. You're either far left or left, or far right or right. And that kind of breeds conflict, doesn't it? And that empowers, do you think, that political divide? Does it empower these racist groups to feel that they can do whatever they want to anybody?
Well, what we saw, specifically around the Trump administration, sort of a normalization of a lot of this the extremist activity on one side, and then of course you had the backlash from the other side. We saw a lot of things, the Floyd murder, a lot of things that happened out of Georgia, a lot of things happening across the country, and people had enough. And I think a lot of it was sort of as an Arab, I hate to use the term, but the straw that broke the camel's back. And we saw a lot of that. And under the Trump administration and his rhetoric and his language, we saw that a lot of hate geared towards Arabs and Muslims was normalized. If the president is using it and saying it, then it must be okay. And we saw that happen with the Arab and the Muslim ban, where he sort of pointed to the Arabs and the Muslims and said, those people are bad. We need to stop them from coming into this country.
And I know he did that with Mexicans too. He pointed to the border and he said, and listen, before he ran, or when he first ran, one of his best friends was Palestinian American, the guy that owned in Houston, the hair Farouk Shami, great guy, just phenomenal guy. And there was this feeling that maybe he understood us. That went out the window pretty quick once he got into office and he became more politicized. But it seemed like there was going to be a hope that it really went downstream pretty fast, and it dragged everybody with him in terms of, especially Arabs, that we became really bad victims of his political bigotry.
Yeah, I think what ended up happening was he saw his avenue of how to get into office. And that was the way of sort of stirring up the emotions, whether they were positive or negative. He wanted to stir them up to sort of create chaos, and through the chaos, he could then win the election. And I think part of it was, at the beginning, he didn't think he was going to win, so he said and did the most outrageous things, and it worked.
It got him support.
He just kept going.
Yeah, that was terrible. But go back to the COVID thing, because that's an interesting thing I'd never thought about. It's hard to discriminate against somebody like you and I talking on Zoom with your pet, by the way.
Sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry. That's okay. We love live radio verite. I'm telling you, we love it. It gives real human contact to the news stories. Yes. But COVID kind of separated us a little bit, didn't it? You would think that there'd be a reduction in the incidence of racial discrimination, but that's not the case, is it?
Well, it kind of changed. I don't want to say it reduced. It changed and transformed the landscape. So we did see issues regarding our own businesses. We saw other problems develop because of COVID, and a lot of that had to do more or less with our community unable to sort of fully tap all the benefits that the federal government and state government was offering to the individuals. And some of that was because of our own lack of knowledge. Some of it was because of a barrier to the language barriers. And some of it was the fact that as in a community, we're not recognized. I mean, we're still classified as white.
Right.
So we were by definition not even able to get some of those benefits by definition.
Yeah, and in fact, one of my columns that I wrote today for the Arab News was actually about that whole thing about the census. And that's been a battle that we've been fighting going back all the way to the 80s. I remember being
Before
on
that.
census. Yeah, even before that, I remember being on census committees working to get us to be recognized. It's never happened fully to our satisfaction. We've never been equalized with all the other groups. And we've lost a lot, haven't we, over the years? That not being in the census undermines your empowerment, I think.
Well, it goes beyond that. I mean, it's not that just that we lost things. We just never got anything that we are entitled. So what a lot of things is what people don't understand is not just the financial aspect.
Right.
There hasn't been a National Institute of Health study done on the Arab American community ever. And the reason why is because there are no reliable data that can be used in a study because we're not counted. We've become the invisible minority, the invisible community. So there are things other than just financials that we're not getting. We don't know what our COVID infectious rates were. We don't know what the percentage of our community is vaccinated because that data is simply not collected. So it's beyond just financial detriment to our community. We lost a lot of stuff just that we weren't even, we don't even realize, I think.
It isn't being excluded from the census then really a form of discrimination. It's just another form of discriminating against us.
Absolutely. It's discrimination because it's basically keeping us out of a lot of the programs that we think we're entitled to. And moreover, it's kind of, again, it's treating us as we don't exist,
right.
Literally as we don't exist at all within this country. And I think that's the biggest problem that we have.
And for listeners, just so they understand, as my guest, Senator Khalaf, who is the national president of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, ADC, a great organization. One of the other benefits besides funding, and I pay taxes, you pay taxes, our money goes to the federal government. A portion of that is supposed to come back to us and help us, but we don't get it because we're not recognized. It gets thrown into the bigger pot because, as you said, we're identified as being white, but it also undermines our political empowerment because if there's a cohesive Palestinian or Egyptian or Syrian community someplace with a sizable population that the census identifies, the government is required to not divide them. Mm-hmm. They're required to put them in a district so that they can have a stronger voice. They've done that with Hispanics. They do that with Asians. They create congressional districts based on the minorities that are identified in the census. Not counting us, as you said, eliminates us. It's like erasing us from that whole process.
Let's look at the prime examples, Dearborn. Dearborn is a majority Arab city within the United States. But when the census issued its data for redistricting, it defined Dearborn as 90% white. Okay.
So, right. So even in a city there, everybody, I look at it as the Plymouth Rock. I like to think of Chicago as Plymouth Rock in the Arab community, but we'll give it to Dearborn. They have this huge population and they slice and dice, not based on keeping Arabs together, right?
Exactly, because when the state does do the slicing and dicing, the data it gets from the census doesn't show Arabs. It shows Dearborn is 90% white, so it can slice and dice it however it wants to.
Yeah, that's terrible. Now, and I know that ADC is part of the movement to get us recognized by the census. There's one issue I've always had, and it's just a discussion issue because I'm Arab. I want to be. I'm a 4-letter word to a lot of people, but I want to be a positive 4-letter word. I don't like the term MENA because to me it sounds like a way to. Okay, people have been taught to dislike Arabs through hundreds of movies over the years. You go to a movie, every bad guy and terrorist is an Arab. You hear the word Arab, you think bad things. Is MENA an effort to go around that perception? Because I think it kind of, in my opinion, that's just my opinion,
yeah, sure.
It weakens us as an Arab community. It's like another way to keep us from being strong. What do you think of that?
Well, I got more bad news for you, Ray. Now there's a third one out there, and that's SWANA.
Say that again. What is it?
There's a third one out there called SWANA, Southwest Asia, because the MENA connotation for a lot of people is very colonialistic because it's Middle East, middle to
Middle
what?
East and North Africa, right?
Yeah, Middle East towards, but again, it's sort of through the eyes of Europe.
Right.
So they said, no, we should be SWANA because we're southwest of Asia, Southwest Asia.
Defined
So
by
there's a third
them.
one. Yeah,
Defined
yeah.
by them, by the people who look at us and discriminate against us, right?
Well, no, it's supposedly that's supposed to be more PC because we're defining it in retrospect to Asia, not in retrospect to that's a different argument. So basically what it came down to between Arab and Middle East had more to do with a compromise than anything else.
Right.
Because the last go around we had, the census threw it in our face that we couldn't even agree what to call ourselves. So therefore they're not going to change the status quo. So it was a compromise category because what Middle East or MENA includes are a lot of the sort of the ethnically distinct minority communities within the Middle East.
Right.
The Armenians
That are not Arab.
The non-Arabs, but
Chaldeans.
The Chaldeans, for example, correct. So it was a way sort of to be more inclusive, and it was a way to sell the census. Okay, fine. Let's just get around this craziness, because ultimately the bigger issue is not necessarily what we call ourselves, but that we're counted.
Right. Would you be against the idea of being Arab/MENA? Because I really want people to know Arab. I'm going to leave this world always knowing that I've been fighting all my life to be an Arab, and they only identify me as an Arab when they hate me. They never identify me as an Arab when we do positive things.
The ADC's always number one preference is Arab. That's always been the case, and we use the term and will use the term, continue to use the term Arab in the future. Our biggest, again, what we thought the big picture was that as long as we are counted as a separate and distinct group, Arab, MENA, SWANA, we just need to be counted.
We're kind of up against a brick wall then in a bureaucracy that is making us hard to get there. You know, they claim that we're divided, but that's because we've been separated for so many years. We don't get any support. We're victimized. They create a situation where we become weak and spread out and fighting with each other.
We want the issue to be transformed away from what to be that we are counted. You know, let's step aside as to what we're going to use, what terms we're going to use, and at least get the issue of being counted done and out of the way. And so that's why we as an organization said, fine, if it's going to be MENA, as long as we're counted, we're okay with that.
All right, that makes a lot of sense. That's it's just great to hear you explain that to people. And I know that Chaldeans, a lot of them say they're not Arab. I respect that. Assyrians, same way, they say they're not Arab. I respect that. But they do embrace Arab culture. They eat the same food. They speak the language, you know, with us. And the most important thing is the people around us look at us and they don't see a difference between you and me, Palestinians, Chaldeans. We're all Arab to them, and Middle Eastern. They don't care. So it would be nice. What's the odds? What are the chances that something is going to happen, in your opinion? This happens every 10 years. So it
happens every 10. Let me say this. It happened every 10 years, and we were 99% there at the last census. It was a done deal. The census did all of their studies, and before this, the census will study something to death before they do it. Is this a comma? Is this a period? Should we put it here? They will study everything. And every one of their studies was saying, yes, the most efficient, accurate way to count is to include a category for MENA. That was it. Whether it was MENA or Arab, but that was the most opportune way to do it. The problem happened is when the Trump administration took over, and that's when everything sort of got confused, tangled up, went into chaos, however, whatever term you want to use. And at the end, the census says, you know what, we're just going to go back to the original way we did it. 10 years ago.
Yikes.
So I chances are that it's going to happen. It's a matter of time, but we need to be vigilant. We need to hold the census and the OMB. Don't forget about OMB is an important player in this, Office of Management and Budget, because OMB is the one that defines the classification. And we need to hold their feet to the fire and say, this was a done deal. You were going to do it, if not for the former administration.
And you know, there are other things that, because we're so focused in fighting for our rights, there are, you know, there are things that sometimes we don't see, but we learn about. For example, in Illinois, and I know that you're doing this on a federal level, but in Illinois, they have a program called the Minority Business Enterprise, Women Business Enterprise. There must be $400 billion in contracts that go out. I don't even know the total amount in Illinois. It's huge. And they set aside 30% of all that money for individuals and groups that are recognized as a quote unquote minority. And they get the first shot at it, and they divide it up, and they ensure that Blacks, Hispanics, women, and a number of other groups, that they get their share of that 30% of all those billions of dollars, which is our tax money, your money, my money. We put it in the pool, but you and I don't get any because they don't consider us as a minority. There's an effort in Illinois they introduced the law. Chris Welsh, the new Speaker of the House, and Cyril Nichols, the state representative, they want us to be recognized as a minority in terms of getting that business. But I understand you're doing it at a national level, right?
Yeah, we've actually, this is an old campaign. We've been doing this for quite some time, and what we did was we proffered a legal brief to the Biden administration to get a minority business designation under the Minority Business Development Authority, which is a sort of an incubator group for minority businesses. And at the time, they didn't give it to us. And so we of course that went dormant under the Trump administration, but we, as part of the new administration come in, we got them to at least commit to looking at this. And so what we've been doing is we've been trying to get the administration to get Arab Americans declared as a minority business, to be entitled to a lot of programs that we should have gotten during COVID. And because we didn't get them, a lot of our businesses, went bankrupt, went under. And had we been given that designation, we could have saved a lot of it. And just to kind of tie it back into the census, one of the pushbacks we're getting from the federal government is that there is no statistics, or there's no numbers as to how many Arab American businesses are there, where are they located, are they successful? So they want to know from us, do we have issues getting loans? Are we getting our interest rates higher than others because of discrimination? That information is not available. So they actually went to us and charged us. The federal government charged us to go out and to collect that information. So the ADC right now is doing a study. Now we're trying to collect data, and we're asking Arab American business owners from all over the country to fill out a questionnaire that we have on our website, which is on adcri.org. Business owners can go there and fill out a questionnaire. Again, it'll be anonymous, so nobody knows who they are. But at least we can now get the data and take that data to the government and say, "Hey, look, here's the data we have for you. Now give us the minority business designation."
Yeah, I did a spotlight for Arab News on the Arab businesses that were targeted by the mayor of Chicago for closure, because she thought somehow that would make her, in my opinion, and the opinions of the businesses, that it would make her look like she's doing something about street gangs. And of course, she's been criticized for not doing enough. So shutting us down made it look like, aha, she did something. One of the problems we had, though, was we don't know how many Arab businesses there are in Chicago. There's no, as you point out, there's no data. The government should be providing that data and saying, oh, you have 6,000 Arab businesses in Chicago. We had to do a count of our own And we managed to identify between 50 and 150 businesses that were impacted. But because the city doesn't identify you as an Arab business, we can't find the paperwork to even verify any of that. It does hold us back, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because again, this is also part of our political power issue as well. Because if we have numbers, if we can say to a member of Congress or to a city council, or listen, we represent 150 businesses within your district, you need to listen to us. That's some power there. But again, we can't do that. So again, also goes back to the idea that we're an underserved community when it comes to resources regarding family services, regarding issues regarding domestic abuse, regarding issues regarding mental health treatment. Why? Because there are no culturally competent and linguistically competent organizations that do work to our community, because we don't know and we're not giving the resources. So because we're not giving the resources, because we can't say there are X number of Arab Americans living in Chicago, now we need to get our fair share of the money. Without that, we're not going to get that money, nor are we going to get the services, and we desperately need.
And I know over the years, it's always the number of how many Arabs in America there are has floated between 1.5 million to 3 million to 4.5 million. I personally think there are a lot more. We have bigger families than a lot of people. We are not counted. There are a lot of Arabs that assimilate simply because it's easier not to deal with the issues of being discriminated against. So they go beyond the identification. It seems to be easier to identify Muslims because of some of the way they dress and because of the congregations at mosques, which stand out. But listen, I know we're coming to the end of the time, and Samer, I have to say it is always a real pleasure to talk to you. It's always, I learn things, and I've been covering this stuff 45 years. I learn things every time I talk to you, every time I participate in ADC. And for those businesses out there, I just want to remind them that website, go there, fill out the form at adcri.org. And to get information on the ADC, it's adc.org, correct?
Correct. That is correct.
Any final thoughts before we say thank you again for joining us and sharing your insight into these issues?
I'll just like to point out one last thing. In this country, we celebrate those communities that hold on to their heritage and hold on to their culture. The Italian Americans, the Irish Americans, the Mexican Americans, and we as a community need to do the same, but we also need to shout out loud of who we are and be proud of identifying as Arab Americans as well.
Yeah.
So with that, I thank you for everything you've done to bring light onto this subject.
Samer, ADC, and you make us proud. Thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to talking to you again. I wish there were no controversial subjects so we could just have a nice conversation about culture and light things, but we are under siege, I think, and we need to talk about things and educate our community. Samer Khalaf, the national president of the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee, joining us here at the Ray Hanania Show. Thank you so much, Samer.
Thank you.
Have a great day. We'll talk, and have a great 4th of July.
Thank you.
And Eid also coming up in about a week and a half.
Thank you.
All right, buddy.
All right.
This is the Ray Hanania Show. I'm Ray Hanania. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk with Shadin Maali, who was the she is the chief of district affairs for Congresswoman Marie Newman, who unfortunately lost her election to Sean Casten in yesterday's Democratic primary. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back right after these messages.
Okay.
ArabNews.com, bringing you breaking news from across the Middle East and the latest on Arabs in America. Get inside the latest headlines with expert analysis and insights at ArabNews.com. Join over 5 million Facebook fans and over 10 million monthly readers. ArabNews.com, news that matters to you.
Imagine you're on a train track, somewhere miles away. A train is headed your way. You can't see it yet, but it's coming, slowly but surely. If you have prediabetes or you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, you may be on the wrong track, and diabetes could be heading your way. Bit by bit, the danger is getting closer and closer. So should you stay on the track you're on now or move to make a change and reduce your risk? If you have prediabetes or you're at risk for type 2 diabetes, you may qualify for the National Diabetes Prevention Program in your local community. This one-year program could be the ongoing support you need to put you on the right track. Not only did participants lose weight, they cut their risk of type 2 diabetes in half. Ready to get on board for a healthier future? Learn more about the National Diabetes Prevention Program and what else you can do to manage and prevent diabetes at michigan.gov/diabetes. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
Clap your hands. If you're happy and you know it and you really want to.
5-year-old Lila and her mom are on their way home from Grandma's, singing Lila's favorite song.
Happy and you know it, move your feet.
A few blocks away, 25-year-old Dylan is visiting friends at a small party. He finishes off his last beer,
Later, skater.
gets in his truck, and starts for home. Mom and Lila turn onto Maple Street.
If you're happy and you
So does Dylan.
If you're happy and you know it and you really want to show it. If you're happy and you know it, shout hooray, hooray!
Every 50 minutes in the United States, someone dies in a crash involving a driver impaired. Don't drive. Drive sober. A message from the Michigan Office of Highway Safety Planning.
Get ready for an amazing experience at Ishtar Restaurant on 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Enjoy excellent hospitality from owners Ali Al-Baghdadi and Fatty Bottom, serving the best in Mediterranean food. Try Chef Ali Al-Baghdadi's famous shawarma, the best Iraqi grills and food, and the best Arabic and international dishes. Dine in our authentic atmosphere or take out. Call 586-698-2585 or check us out on Facebook. Ishtar Restaurant practices all CDC guidelines and is open every day 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. Have an amazing experience today at Ishtar Restaurant, 3625 15 Mile Road, Sterling Heights. The Ray Hanania Show is brought to you by the U.S. Arab Radio Network and sponsored by Arab News Newspaper, the Middle East's leading English language publication, with print and online editions in Saudi Arabia, Dubai, France, Japan, Pakistan, England, and the United States. Listen to live radio every Wednesday at 5 p.m. Eastern in Detroit, Washington, D.C., New York, and Ontario, Canada. Or watch the live broadcast on Facebook.com/Arab News. The Ray Hanania Show is rebroadcast in Chicago at 12 noon on Thursday. For more information on the radio stations, live Facebook broadcast, and podcasts, visit ArabNews.com. And now, here's your host, columnist and U.S. Special Correspondent for Arab News, Ray Hanania.
And welcome back to the radio show. We had a great discussion with Samar Khalaf, the national president of ADC, on the census, on discrimination, the impact of COVID, and even the effort to designate Arabs as a minority to qualify for minority business enterprises in different states and federally. So I'm very, excited about some of the things that they're doing. I got to tell you, the person that I'm on the line with was very instrumental in getting Marie Newman elected in 2020. And I have to say, Marie Newman has been more pro-Palestinian than a lot of Palestinians I know. Shadin Maali, I have you as the Chief of District Affairs for Congresswoman Marie Newman, who was elected in 2020 to represent the 3rd Congressional District, which the New York Times said had the largest concentration of Palestinian American and Arab voters in the country out of all 435 districts. And I know when we interviewed Marie, she had talked about how that was going to expand in the 6th district. Unfortunately, Marie didn't win. What happened with that?
Hi, Ray. Thank you for having me on. So today I'm here in my personal capacity. So, on the official side,
Yes.
that's, I'm a public servant, but today I'm here as a community leader. And, I have advised the campaign, worked very closely with Marie on important issues for our community. So you're right. She has been amazing on our issues, on our pro-peace, pro-justice issues. She really came to the table and represented us on on the things that we cared about. So in terms of what happened, I mean, I don't know what happened. I think when you speak honestly about the issue of Palestine and Israel, and you're critical of some of the policies that Israel has implemented, you are demonized. And I don't think that's fair. And I think that some PACs tend to see that as an attack on Israel when it's really just an attack on some of the discriminatory policies.
Yeah, I criticize our government all the time. Nobody calls me anti-American or unpatriotic. I criticize the Republicans. I criticize the Democrats. Why is it that we're anti-Semitic when we criticize Israel's government? You know, it just doesn't seem right. And you're absolutely right. There are these.
We can be critical with our own government, right? We can criticize our government left and right. And we do it every day. It's our fundamental democratic right to do so. But for some reason, this whole anti-Semitic label, when we question or are critical of Israel in any way, anybody that is pro-peace, pro-justice is saying here in our district and all over the country and the world, is that we want rights to be recognized for everybody. That's all.
She was being attacked from every direction by these anonymous, they claim to be PACs with names and everything, but when you really try to figure out who it is, it either traces back to pro-Israel activists who are getting money from, a foreign country. Israel is a foreign country. People don't understand that. And it seemed like she was, and they pummeled her about the Middle East and Palestine. And it seemed like they took the focus off of all the major progressive issues that touch American lives and voters every day. That, Palestine is just a small part of her agenda, an important one, but it wasn't her.
Yeah, she was really just being progressive on every issue, both locally and domestically, as well as abroad, overseas. And not just with Palestine, also with the fascism in India, the persecution on Muslims and minority religious groups in India as well. So she really was the model for what it means to be progressive on everything. Not excluding the Palestinian-Israeli issue. She was progressive on everything. And that's why we all supported her. I mean, in the last stretch here, actually, during the last 3 years, our community has been behind her. But
the majority of the community.
Absolutely. I mean, and as she has really proven herself legislatively and outspoken on the issues that we care about. Why? Again, it's because she's a representative for everybody, not just one group of people, but really for everybody. And I think anybody who disregards this issue or gets endorsements from groups like AIPAC and the Democratic Majority for Israel really don't understand this district. And if they want support in the long run, that they really have to make sure that they come to the table and sit down and understand the fundamental devaluing, the dehumanization of the Palestinian people overseas, and why everybody's is in an uproar and trying to make sure that the rights of the Palestinians are recognized, because we can't have peace in the region. It's bad for both Israelis and the Palestinians when there is this apartheid system that's working against the human rights of the Palestinian people in every facet of their life, in education, in healthcare, in their work setting, in every facet of their life, in their living conditions, electricity rationing, water rationing, everything, every single aspect of their life is affected. So that's why we need to make sure we have people, especially here, that if they want our votes and they want us to support them, to represent us fairly on this issue.
And of course, I brought you on because Marie Newman's loss is devastating to this district and our community. And the entire movement to bring justice, and nobody's saying to be anti-Israeli, we're saying to bring justice to Palestinians so we get treated fairly. with the same respect everybody else gets. So I really brought you on as a longtime political activist. I've known you for a long time. There are only a few people in our community, and it makes me feel sad to say this, that understand politics.
Yeah.
It's an emotional thing to the majority of the community. A lot of them live here physically, but mentally they're back home. There's only a handful of people that I can talk with and say, what happened in this election? And, I wanted you to come on to we can't avoid talking about what happened to Marie Newman, but I did want to look at all the races. But in the end, was she that targeted by these PACs and by Democrats? It looked like the Democrats pushed her into that corner to force her out.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's a multitude of factors that have contributed to her loss. And I mean, everything, she knew that there was of course, the census, every 10 years we have the census, and we do the legislative house in Illinois does the redistricting. And of course, who's behind that? It's the Madigan machine. And she's
Right.
been very good friends with that group, right? Right.
Up until how long?
Yeah.
So she starts speaking about Palestine.
Well, right. I mean, I think it's Marie has been an anti-status quo candidate and representative for everybody. I mean,
Right.
really not.
So you're saying they were against her
Yeah,
even before the Palestine issue because she was progressive.
I think, yes, exactly.
The machine.
The machine thought that she was too left-leaning.
Right.
And here's the thing about Marie that I've come to learn, and I've known about actually from the very beginning. She's a pragmatist, and she likes to problem solve, and she'll sit and talk with anybody. So it's not about, it's really about, progressive to me means forward moving, solving problems, not necessarily left leaning, just like getting to a place where we can move forward and recognize our problems and try to solve them. So I think her being very pro-immigration, very, her standpoint on healthcare, I think might have been a little too out there for the machine. and I think also, I have to say this, especially when you look at Congress and the makeup of Congress, it's 27% women. And I think there's still this good old boys club mentality. And it's it's a familiarity over the time, these relationships that have developed with people. It's like it's a fraternity house almost. And if you're outside of that, and if you're really focused on the interests of the people, not corporate PACs, not special interest groups that are not in favor of human rights, I think that hurts you in the long run in politics. I think we need to get the money out of politics. It shouldn't be about who raises the most money. It should be about who represents the people the best.
Yeah, you're going to get pushback from the media, which profits from all that money. They thrive in conflict.
Yeah.
They thrive in political, and I'm not trying to get you to attack the media. I'll do it. I don't want to put you in that corner, but I've always believed that they should put a limit on how much a candidate could spend on a race to equalize the candidates, so we could look at the issues rather than all these mailers and, the fanciness of the money that's being spent.
Campaign reform, we need that. We absolutely need campaign reform, because when you see every time you mail out a negative ad smearing a candidate, that's $30,000 to $50,000. And most of the time, it's not the candidates that are doing that. It is the PACs, the special interest PACs, that are endorsing these candidates and are working on their behalf.
From the dark shadows.
The dark shadow, the dark money, exactly. And that's exactly what's happening. And that's what happened with Marie every single day. I'm not like, we were getting 3 in my house. We're getting 2 to 3 ads smearing Marie to try to get her out. And a lot of people are not very educated when it comes to politics, so they don't take the time to read through things and really analyze why the smear campaign is happening. A lot of times when you see a smear campaign, I tend to kind of be reflective and sit back and think about why is the establishment working so hard to taint the name of somebody who is the third most prolific legislator in office out of the new freshman class. So, I mean, she's so effective. She brought people together from every angle to work through problems on public safety standpoint, on on so many different standpoints, on also from a foreign policy perspective, on the cannabis issue. So, I mean, she brought people to, she's bringing people together to solve problems. Why would you work so hard to get a woman, progressive women? That's the other thing. I feel like there's an attack on women and women of color.
Yeah, there were a lot of women that I saw that lost in this election. The turnout was low. I was a little surprised. And when I was looking at Marie Newman's race, it seemed like this, as a journalist, I can accept criticism when I know it's coming from a candidate to another candidate.
Yes.
What I think is wrong is when the criticism comes from these PACs that just say whatever they want to say, and they spend $50,000 for a mailer. You have to spend $50,000 to respond to that. So it's about the money.
It is completely about the money. And that's why it's so horrible, because it doesn't, we're not on an equal footing. If you can't raise $3 million to run a race, right. I mean, is it, if you can't raise that much money if it takes votes and it takes money, but if that money is coming from special interest PACs that are in essence buying our candidates, who then does the candidate who wins, who do they answer to? Yeah. Right.
Marie Newman was very gracious in her calling Sean Casten and saying she's a Democrat. She supports the Democratic Party. She was gracious to the Democratic Party. I don't believe the Democratic Party was gracious to her.
No, they marginalized her. They really have. They've told her that your voice, here's the thing. I mean, to be honest with you, and I don't know if they recognize that, when so many of us here in the Arab, South Asian and Muslim community have bonded with her over our issues, and the machine says, we don't see you as representative of this party, and we are going to put you into this little corner, and we're going to take you out, erase you, basically. What does that say to us?
They're erasing us.
They're erasing us.
Yeah. My guest on the line is Shadin Maali. She's a long-term political activist. She knows politics, I think, as well as I do. I've been covering it for 45 years. She's only been covering it since she was 5 for the last 20 years. So I'm going to get that down there. But I know your family. Your mother is a phenomenal person, and everybody was great. So we have her on to talk about some of the elections. Now, we did see one great bright spark for the Arab community. Believe me, Marie Newman's loss is a huge loss for us. I kind of blame my own community because of the divisions and the infighting from some corners, but we did see Abdel Nasser Rashid win after 3 tries. He unseated an incumbent who I thought took him for granted, which is the biggest mistake you can make in politics. And Rashid took advantage of that and won.
So Abdel Nasser Rashid is I think he's a brilliant person. I mean, he's a Harvard grad. He has been a public servant for a long time, really smart, really sharp. And he ran, I mean, he wasn't running for seats that were too hard to attain. He was running for seats that should have been very easy for somebody like him to get. And I believe that in the commissioner position, when he ran against Morrison, that we still had some Democratic centrists that couldn't get themselves to vote.
Yeah, and he and I spoke. I didn't support him the first time when he ran against Morrison. I had known Morrison for a long time. It was very hard for me to break from that. Since that election, though, I've seen a whole different side of Sean Morrison, and I'm just disgusted with myself that I even supported him, and I didn't support Abdel Nasser. He came within, it shows how weak Sean Morrison is. He came within 1,377 votes of defeating the 7-year incumbent in office. And he almost beat him. I think Morrison is a weak candidate. But since then, Abdel Nasser and I have talked. I understand him better. I think sometimes that, we don't talk among ourselves. We don't introduce ourselves. We sometimes even stereotype ourselves, politically. And I think that I thought he did a great campaign this time. I thought his campaign was very effective.
He knew, he did the polling, he did the research before he even decided to get into the race. And he had the support. He had the support of a lot of different folks in our community. And that's what it takes to win. I mean, he was running for a position that he could win. He had the experience, and he had the support of the community and also a lot of grassroots organizations. That's what you need.
I was going to say, though, listen, you should assume you have the support of the community and focus on the non-community. You got to get those voters who are not Arab, who are worried about property taxes, who are worried about crime, and you have to address that. And I think he did do that. I did not hear him talk about Palestine in the Middle East, except for his opponents.
Right.
But he focused on the issues that homeowners and families and seniors cared about. And I thought that was a very effective strategy.
And the choice issue, the pro-choice issue. I mean, he talked about that with, he was proud of his stance on the issue, and he reassured women that he would always support their right to choose, to do whatever they want to do in their own body, and have access to healthcare all the time. That's important. It's a human rights issue. It's a women issues, healthcare issues, the women's rights issues. And anyway, so he really did a wonderful job of connecting with a lot of different folks, not just one group, but a lot of different folks. And again, that's what you need in order to win. And can I just tell you how I saw both the community mobilize so beautifully and wonderfully for him and for Congresswoman Marie Newman to get them both elected. And that is phenomenal. We had people that never had registered to vote. We had voting ambassadors dragging hundreds of people to the polls and letting them know that this primary is very important. Primaries are low turnout.
Right.
They're notoriously known for being low turnouts. And that's what we had in the case of Congresswoman Marie Newman. We thought we were going to have at least like somewhere around 60,000 turnout. And I'm not sure where we are. I think we're somewhere, well, we got to be around that level, but initially we thought we were going to be about 100,000.
I was going to say, but in a congressional district, you'd think the turnout would be even stronger, even in a primary,
But
with
I
that
think
race
people
between
were
two Democrats.
Right. So people were very disenfranchised. I was at the polls talking to some people, and they're saying, you Democrats better get your stuff together, because we're going to lose to the Republican Party. That's what I was hearing left and right. And I mean, you saw Picow had won against a more moderate,
Right.
more Republican. So
Gary Grasso.
yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Listen, I don't agree with everything that he stood for, but he was much more moderate than Picow. Picow is off the deep end. He's like way out there. And he is, I consider, a threat to political stability in that district and our community. So I think it was very gracious of Marie to say to Sean, I'm going to support you despite everything that happened during that election.
Right. Although I got to tell you, some people that I've talked to were so disappointed in the way that Marie was marginalized that they've even said they were going to switch parties.
Yeah.
And we have to talk them down from that. We can't let them do that. But it's been an uphill battle, and but the momentum that I see again every time. And what was wonderful about Marie running and getting the support of the community is this: she's a South Side Irish woman who got the strong support of our community this time around. Really strong support. I mean, many early vote rallies for her. It just wasn't enough with the kind of the machine working against her. If the machine would have just stayed neutral and less biased and given her a chance, she would have done much better.
Well, the nice thing about congressional elections is you really serve 1 year and then you're back into an election campaign.
It's
So
actually
she could,
3 months after. No, here's the thing, even after you win an election,
right.
months into your term serving in March, you got to start running again to raise money. I mean, seeing the behind the scenes, it's absolutely amazing to me. It has to change because that's not what we are. You know, when you are elected as a elected official to serve the public, you are not elected to raise money. You are elected to serve the public.
Right.
Yeah.
And then suddenly you're forced to focus on something that you may not have. We only got a couple minutes left. Any final thoughts about the elections that we went through? I know there were a couple other candidates that Nabil Saeed, I think, won a state rep nomination.
Beautiful. She won, and she won. She's very young. I mean, she's relatively inexperienced, but she very smart, brilliant girl, and got the support of the community and got the support of mainstream constituents. So she resonated. And people want that fresh, young energy. Yeah.
And
yeah.
what would you say to the community in terms of moving forward in politics? I mean, what have you learned about politics that might help them to better understand how to be successful?
Thank you so much for asking that question, because I think so often we think the most important thing is to run, and you are elected as an elected leader and to serve the public, but really where the power lies, and of course continue to do that, but also intern on government staff on every level, local as well as state and federal. So that's one thing I would say, make sure you get in, and it's pretty much, if you prove yourself and you show that you're an asset, you'll go far. And that's what I would say to people. Don't just think that the way to public service is to run for office. It's to get your foot in the door, learn the process. There's a lot of bureaucracy and you have to know the process in order to be effective. And in order to represent yourself represent your community on the issues that they care about.
Shadin Maali has a lot of experience in political consulting, political activism. She was invited here on that basis, but obviously she is also chief of district affairs for Congresswoman Marie Newman, but we invited her to talk about the political aspects of politics and elections overall. Shadin, we really appreciate you joining us. And is there a website where you want people to go? Do you have a website for your?
I don't yet. No, I don't.
No, you got to set one up. We got to get you one. All right. And we got to have you back on talking about elections and stuff. Shadin Maali, my guest. Thank you so much, Shadin.
Thank you, Ray, for having me. It's a great pleasure.
It really has been fun to talk to you. I just want to thank everybody for listening to the radio show this past hour. We're here every Wednesday. Next week, we're going to do a program on the Eid to talk about why it's so important to help Americans and even the community better understand Eid al-Adha. We also have a possibility. I know Blinken's staff, the Secretary of State, and Ned Price, the spokesperson, have indicated they may come on the show because Biden is going to be traveling to the Gulf. So we may be able to talk to them next week. We'll see what happens. But this is one of the very few places where you can learn about Arab Americans and Arab American politics. Shadin Maali, thank you so much. We also want to thank Samar Khalaf, of the national president of ADC. I'm Ray Hanania. Go to arabnews.com to get more information on this radio show. We will see you next Wednesday here at 5 o'clock Eastern time on WNZK in Detroit and WDMV in Washington, D.C. And remember, 12 noon in Chicago on Thursday on 1080 a.m. You can hear this show. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.
WNZK.